Okay, so B'siyata D'Shmaya, we jump back into Likutei Moharan Torah Yud, the perfect timing, literally perfect timing on this incredible Titus Esther morning, a very auspicious day for Tefillah, and a very auspicious day for Hachana, for the last minute preparations that we can do for Purim Haba Aleinu L'Tova. And Kehal Yedidim had it that we should be learning Rebbe Nachman's Purim lesson on Titus Esther, which is really, really, really tremendous and remarkable, and something that we should feel very grateful for, that Hashem is guiding our chabura. And this list of all the people around the world who are learning with us and are gaining and are growing, and just remarkable messages that I'm getting every day from people who are really benefiting because Hashem from this limud that we're all doing together. And we jump back into Torah Yud, having spoken about the elevation of tefillah from a mountain to a field to a home. And we spoke about how that word elevation is strange in this context because physically it's a descent. You're going from topographically, you're going from a higher place to a lower place to an even lower place, so to speak. But we said that spiritually, wherever something is able to reach lower and lower down, it means that it's rooted higher and higher up. Right? The greater the light, the lower down it's able to reach. And so it's an elevation at source that's rising and lifting this element of prayer, meaning our concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our relationship with Him, that goes from a mountain where a person has to go very far away out of their standard functioning, and a person has to make incredible, strenuous efforts to reach a mountaintop, and from that place serve God, down to the place of a field, which is also not a person's own space. It's a little bit more accessible, but it's not yet in a person's lived experience of every minute of their life. To bring Hashem down into the hasaga, into the consciousness of bias, into the consciousness of a home. And we said that's Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And when it's on the level of Yaakov, then we have the pasuk Beisi Yaakov, Nelchu ba'ar Hashem. All the nations of the world are able to walk in the light of that consciousness, and that brings about the greatest Geulah, the greatest revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. And that's the pshat, ki beisi beis tefillah yikar l'chol ha'amim. When my house is a home of tefillah, so then yikar l'chol ha'amim, then every human being in the whole entire world is able to find relevance, is able to find connectivity. And that's pshat in the pasuk, Gadol Hashem muhula ma'od. When is God great? When muhulal ma'od, when even those that are the aspect of ma'od in a relative sense, those who are not the priesthood sect, those who are a little bit more distant, at least in theory on the surface, so they are praising Hashem, and that's, oh wow, welcome, good morning, thanks for joining us, great.
That'll be ahead of 6 o'clock.
Thank you for joining us. So when he's praised even by them, so then Gadol Hashem, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's greatness is expressed. And when is that? Likutei Moharan Amud, when the har becomes the ear, right? When the hasaga of har, when the consciousness of the mountain is transferred or transformed really into the hasaga of the bias. And the Rebbe Nachman said, if that's the case, that the tefillah can be elevated from a mountain to a field to a home. Who's the one who does that? He says it's the tzaddik. But the tzaddik emes is the person who mamish knows how to daven, as the Gemara Baba Basra says, Mi sheish lechoyle b'seich beisai, when a person in their own hasaga of bias has a choyle, right? So they've accessed the ceiling, so to speak, of what they can accomplish. Yelech etzel chacham yivakish levrachmim. Let him go to a tzaddik and let him daven for rachamim. And the Rebbe said with our Bali Gaiva who don't want to do that, and they're called Avi Melech because Avi Melech, they want to rule. And the pasuk says about them, Hashev Eishes Ha'ish. Hashev Eishes Ha'ish. Eishes is Rosh Tevis Adni Sefasai Tiftach. So it's a reference to prayer. Hashev Eishes Ha'ish. Return prayer to its rightful source. Go to the tzaddik. And stop thinking that we can daven on our own. We should go to the tzaddik to return to the ish. Ki Navi hu, Rebbe Nachman says, Navi is Nivs Vasayim, fluent prayer. And the pasuk continues, "V'yispal ba'adach," and he'll daven for you. And why does the tzaddik, he has adni sefasai tiftach? Why is it his eishes? Why is it his wife, so to speak, that he's married to this concept of prayer? Because Hashev, and Hashev is Rosh Tevis, har, sadeh, and bias. And that's the tzaddik's capacity to elevate prayer from the level of a mountain to the level of a field to the level of the home. And the Rebbe said that these Bali Gaiva, they think that they can daven on their own. They don't need tzaddikim. And so, he says that they continually empty out their sack, which is an aspect of fasting, but ultimately they don't realize that the sack has holes. You can empty it all you want, but there are fundamental holes in the sack. And that was the context of the drasha, going to the second column, where we left off yesterday, of Zeh Perish, Vayihei Marikim Sakeim. They were emptying out their sack, they were fasting and fasting and fasting, as the Gemara tells us that the guf is comparable to a sack, and they were emptying out their sack. But v'hine ish tsar kaspai b'sakai. Kaspai is money, but it could also be a reference to kisufin. Their taivas were still connected to their body. They didn't gain anything. And not only theirs, right, but v'hine ish tsar kaspai, v'yiru es tzaras kaspeim. They saw this connection to their kisufin that's still connected to them. Hema, not only their own, but va'aviem, not only the taiva that they brought upon themselves, but even what's left over from the birth that they weren't born in the proper kedusha. Va'aviem, even their father's taiva was still there. And when they saw that, va'yira'u, when they saw that, they were very afraid. And this is Yehuda communicating to Yaakov Avinu what had occurred, right, in Mitzrayim when they came down to Yaakov Avinu for the first time. And the psukim continue, and here we jump back in with Zeh Perish, and this is the commentary and understanding of the psukim that continue. Vayarem lehem Yaakov Aviem, and Yaakov Avinu said to them, Oisi shikaltem, you messed me up big time now, right? And that's what it means on a simple level. Oisi shikaltem, you made my life very difficult. Because I'm just going to read all the psukim, and then we'll go back to the drasha. Yosef inenu, Yosef is gone, right? Because he thought that Chai Rach Alasu, the Yosef was eaten up. And Shimon einanu, and now Shimon isn't here because they kept him in Egypt. Ve'es Binyamin tikachu, and you want to now take Binyamin? It's like, what? You're going to all my kids? You're going to destroy my whole family? Says Rebbe Nachman, what's the deeper meaning of this in the context of Ihine Ishtar Kaspe B'Sakoi, the Balgaiva, Hema Va'aviyim V'Yira'u? What's the progression of concepts now unfolded through the psukim? Says the Heilige Rebbe, Schlusi Agunalenu, V'Zeh Perish V'Yerem Lehem Yaakov Aviyam Oisi Shikaltem Yosef Inenu. Zeh Remez Atoi Chachas HaSeichel. Says the Heilige Rebbe, Schlusi Agunalenu, this is hinting to the seichel that's giving musar to the person's intellect, that part of the person that has clarity. Ki as-seichel mechiach es habali gaiva, haroitzim lehizgadel. If a person's listening very carefully, their seichel is still a place that is above the delusion of grandeur that causes a person to think that there's some kind of exception to the standard rule of humanity. Every single person thinks that they're the most special person in the world, right? In some aspect. And because of that, it's completely delusional to think that we're the most special person in the world, because every single person is literally the most special person. And only a person is completely delusional is under the very mistaken impression that they can do something unique that other people can't do, right? Or that they are perfect in every single area. There was naloi haya v'lei nivra. There was never such a thing. Even the greatest genius in one area is completely deficient in another area, and so on and so on. And so there's a delusion of grandeur. That's an expression that we use. And the Gemara tells us that a person who is a, let me see, he's going to say it in 4 lines in the Gemara Psachim. I'll just read it. Ki kolam is ga'eh chachmas mistalakes mimenu. Whoever is a balgaiva, their chachma leaves them. And it's not that they become a balgaiva and their chachma leaves them. Meaning there's something fundamentally divorced from seichel all the while that a person is a balgaiva. That's not a rational thing. That gaiva is not rational. It's a total delusion. So therefore the seichel is going to give musar to the balgaiva, haroitzim lehizgadel, and it's happening within the person in and of himself. Like today in psychology, we talk about different parts of the person. This is literally happening all within the person. Yaakov Avinu is not something external; it's a part of the person that's giving the person musar. It's like trying to clarify for the person what's going on over here. How are you living? Ki Yaakov b'chinas haseichel, because Yaakov Avinu, we learned in Torah Aleph, is the aspect of intellect. K'mashitirgam unkelis v'Yaakoveni v'chakmeni. Like the Gemara, the Targum Unkelis translates the word v'Yaakoveni when Esav says Yaakov Avinu tricked me twice, and that's why his name is Yaakov. And the Targum Unkelis says v'chakmeni. The word Yaakov literally means chacham. So that's Yaakov Avinu is the symbol for chachma. Vayayim lehem Yaakov avihem. What's avihem? Ki av v'chachma. In Kabbalah, the letter Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei correlates to the sphere of chachma, and we call it in Partsufim Abba. Right? Abba and chachma have a very deep connection. Ki av b'chachma. So Yaakov Avihem, it's the Seichel who's giving them Musar. And he says, I see shikaltem. You're corrupting me. Because right? Meaning what you're doing and the way that you're acting and the way that you're self-reflecting is a corruption of me, says Yaakov Avinu, right? Because that's the Bechina Seichel. Yosef Einanu is mamish giving Musar. Zebechinas Tikkun Uvas. The aspect of Yosef is rectifying that which is distorted. Hainu adayin loiti kantem uvas. You haven't fixed up yourself. And that should cause shame, and that should cause the recognition that a person is not the way that they're supposed to be. And you should be embarrassed because of that. Now, why is that all wrapped up into the symbol of Yosef, which Yosef einenu, so that means that you haven't fixed yourself up. Because rectifying that which needs fixing is the aspect of Yosef, because Yosef was called Al Shem Asaf Alekim Es Charpasi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has corrected my shame. Right, so if you don't have Yosef, that's a bechina of a lack of correction, which should cause a person to feel embarrassed about themselves. Yosef einanu. He says, "What are you, Balgaiva over what? Your whole life is falling apart, and you haven't yet rectified yourself." So Yosef einanu, and not only that, Shimon einanu. Now that you don't have Yosef HaTzadik, meaning in yourself, you don't either have Shimon. What's Shimon? What's that a reference to? What's that symbol? Where Leah says, Hashem has heard that I'm snua, that I was hated, and He gave me another child. What's the depth of this? Ki ata ein chasanu. Now, because you don't have the bechina of Yosef, there is absolutely no realm in which it's possible for you to be hated. This is a classic Lamdus in Drush of Rebbe Nachman. I mean, it's unbelievable. Listen to this reasoning. Ki machma shaloiti kantes atzmecha. Now that you have not fixed yourself, you're not in any position to give musar to anybody else. Right? Because the Gemara says, you fix yourself up first, then you give musar to other people. Right? So a person who's not a perfect tzaddik cannot give musar to other people. Can give chizuk to other people, can give guidance to other people, can include himself within, and always say we and never you, that's okay. But to go and start giving musar, so wait a second, what are you giving musar to me for? You yourself are not fixed up. And if you can't give musar, says the Rebbe, al kain ein chasanu, then you'll never be hated. A person who gives musar, so people don't like that, right? People don't like that. These people are very popular speakers, right? It's not because they're better speakers than anybody else, but it's because they're not giving musar. If they don't give musar, so then people like to come to them because all you get is chizuk. You don't get musar, right? Sometimes I wonder whether I fall in that category. But then I had a nechama because I looked at the Gemara in Tainus, which talks about this playing out between two tzaddikim, that one of them was getting discouraged, and the other one came and he gave him a mashal. He says somebody's selling diamonds and somebody's selling earth. You know, or somebody. I can't remember exactly the mashal, but the mashal made it sound like people go to the thing that's sparkly and shiny, even though it's not it's not what's it called. But if you look in Rashi says he just said that to be menachem, right? Because he said you're teaching divrei agada, I'm teaching divrei halacha. Of course, people want the divrei agada. If only they would know what divrei halacha. But Rashi says it was just nechama. Chas v'shalom to call divrei agada a little cheaper. Torah is homogeneous. Torah is one whole. So that gave me a lot of nechama. Anyway, be that as it may, a moichiach is sanoi. And we see that from the Gemara in Ksubas, that people are only going to feel a sense, again, of hatred or distant from a person who's giving musar in that way. So we feel that, we see here that a person who gives musar is sanu. So therefore, because Yosef einanu, you haven't fixed yourself up, so certainly you're in no position to give musar to anybody else, and therefore v'shimon einanu. What's shimon? Shimon is ki snua anoichi, right? So you're not sanu, right? Snua so shimon einanu snua. You're not hated. And then he finishes off this little rant in Ves Binyamin tikachu. And the Seichel says, okay, so you don't have Yosef, and therefore you don't have Shimon. And now you want to take Binyamin? What's Binyamin? Zemara godless. Binyamin is greatness compares Rashi. Binyamin al Shem Eretz Yisrael. Benyamin, right? Binyamin is connected to Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael who gavoy mikol ha'aratzos, and in Zvachim Eretz Yisrael is the highest of all the lands. See, Rebbe Nachman excavates this pasuk, squeezes out of 6 words. Yosef einanu, Shimon einanu, that's Binyamin. You want to take Binyamin tikach. You want to take it out. Eretz Yisrael. That's one thing. But im kol zeh as Binyamin tikachu shatem loichem la'atzvachem gadlos. And now you're looking that you should be a bagay v'dainu shesiyam ha'seichel ha'mechiach esam. The seichel is giving them musar. And the seichel is hated, I guess, probably for this reason. You see over here, the seichel is giving them musar. And he says, Alai hayakulana. This is terrible. The more that you go down this road, you're living in grandeur, in a delusion of grandeur. And a person is in a delusion, I see shikaltem. That's corrupting Yaakov Avinu. Unbelievable. Okay, that's the drasha of Rebbe Nachman, all reflecting back on the earlier psukim of Merikim Sakeim. They think that they're tzaddikim for this reason, and ultimately, they're withholding themselves from going to the tzaddik that tzaddikim should daven for them, and even worse, they're withholding other people from going to tzaddikim, and in so doing, they are holding back the taiva of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, that a Kodesh Baruch Hu is misabeh l'tfilas and shel tzaddikim. Says the Heilige Rebbe Nice Hey. And the reason I'm reading that levatel is because there's a little bit of a confusion over whether this word is leval hagaiva or levatel hagaiva, and I know for a fact that it's levatel hagaiva because a family member of mine is in ownership of the second edition printing of Likutei Moharan, which has both the first chelik and the second chelik in it printed for the first time. Was printed by Rebbe Nachman in his own house at his private printing press. And over there I checked and it says Levatel. So it's a Torah sefer that came later on, but in the early editions it's clearly Levatel, and even I think grammatically it's yeah. It's.
Why did they change it?
I have no idea. Somebody should get in touch with them. I have no idea, but it is for sure levatel agaiva. So be'etza yu'utza levatel agaiva, says the Rebbe. So how are you going to get out of this gaiva? What should we do? That in a certain sense, we're describing like somebody else. Let's be honest, it's all of us. Right? All of us feel that we don't need tzaddikim. All of us feel that we can go it alone. So how do we get rid of this? She avodah zara. He says, let's be honest. It's mamish avodah zara. He says it's a literal toyeva. Right? This aspect of gaiva, ha'ikru al yedei hiskarvus l'tzaddikim. Right? There's only one way, and that's to be mevatel oneself to a tzaddik. To draw close to tzaddikim, which in Likutei Moharan means learning their works, connecting, trying to be mekayim the eitzas, right? To live a life revolved around the very clear and demarcated path of a tzaddik. That's how to get out of the gaiva. There's no, the gaiva is preventing him from going to a tzaddik. Says Rebbe Nachman, go to a tzaddik. That's a very, very clear piece of advice. Over here, Rebbe Nachman understands that on a much deeper level because it says the trua, the shofar blast, the iu rucha, which is the ruach, the spirit that's blown through the shofar, is avir el acher. That is destroying any idolatrous thoughts and feelings within the heart of the shomea, within the heart of the shomea called shofar, of anybody who's hearing that shofar being blown. Says Rebbe Nachman, what's that a reference to? The tzaddik u'bechinas rucha. We already learned in Torah Ches that the tzaddik's whole thing is rucha. Kamashukos of ish asher ruach bai. Yeshua, that aspect of the tzaddik, is considered a person who has ruach inside of him. And the tzaddik is breaking us out of our own delusion of grandeur by showing us what real greatness is. The hasaga of ayim ekayim kavayda that we learned about. That aspect of rotzai, where the tzaddik's able to give a person this realization that you think that you're anywhere, you're not holding anywhere, you don't know anything, and the tzaddik helps the person to be humble. He's the ish asher ruach bai. And through this tzaddik, the ruach kavaya, this aspect of an elevated spirit, which is the bechina of avodah zara, which is el acher, in this week's parasha v'nasa, me acher echad. And the tzaddik is able to tell a person, there's only Hashem, and stop thinking about yourself, and revert to recognizing that there's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's only Hashem. And that's the tzaddik's whole job, is not to bring him to the tzaddik, because that's just as idolatrous, right? Meaning if the tzaddik serves this purpose of bringing people to the tzaddik, and that's where they are, that didn't solve the problem. That's just another form of avodah zarah. Instead of serving yourself, you're serving another human being. That's not the tzaddik's role. The tzaddik is hollow. The tzaddik doesn't exist. The tzaddik is a channel that brings you to the tzaddik through, and a vacuum cleaner sucks you up and out, straight into HaKadosh Baruch Hu's embrace. I wrote a lengthy post yesterday. I'm not going to go through the whole thing now. I will share it as Hashem on the discussion group because I think it's relevant. Where it was clear to me, literally sitting in this seat with this chumash yesterday, just reading through the psukim in a way that I never had this clarity before, about the Chetei Egel being really about a misunderstanding of the role of the tzaddik and a willingness to replace Moshe Rabbeinu, with an idol, and that reflects more deeply on the way that they considered Moshe, and the way that they misunderstood his role, and the way that they overestimated the position and the role of a tzaddik. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu Taka responds to Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech Reid. He says, you need to disseminate, you need to come down a couple of notches. You need to let people know that that the most you're going to tolerate is a Reb with a dash, and not Morenu and not anything. Right? We're all the same. We're literally all the same. We are. And each of us has our voice, and each of us, what you see, mavur, the people are writing beautiful Chidushei Torah. Everyone is the same. And that's the R of the Geulah. When everybody recognizes they're a tzaddik, and they're no bigger or no less a tzaddik than anybody else, but no less, but no bigger. And that's the R of the Geulah. And that's the role of the tzaddik. When a person is able to come down and demonstrate that the only thing that they have in mind is not to bring people to them, but to bring people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's healthy. That's the way that it's supposed to be. And that was the correction of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. And yet, the psukim that continue, I just said I wouldn't go into this, but just very briefly, the psukim that continue speak all about, what a chaval. Okay, we're going to miss you. Okay, but go for it. You'll catch the recording. Thank you so much for joining. So he continues, and the psukim continue to express the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu and to demarcate the clarity that Moshe Rabbeinu was different, right? In a certain way, a person recognizes that tzaddik is special, but there's a clarification of role of the Vayerid. There's a clarification of that. Okay. So through this, the tzaddik is able to get us out of El Acher, serving a foreign god, and to serve Hashem Echad. Ki hu kutzada is dalid, because the tzaddik in another place in the Tikkun Zayar, I'm sorry, a little bit further yet in Tikkun Chaf Aleph, but on another page, on Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis, the tzaddik is called the kutzada is dalid, the little thorn that sticks out the back of the letter dalid that differentiates between a dalid and a reish. Why do we need there to be a differentiation between dalid and reish? Because the word echad and the word acher are 2/3 the same, right? The only difference between them is the dalid and the reish. And the tzaddik is the kutzada is dalid. The tzaddik is that element that's able to turn the reish into a dalid and differentiate between Hashem echad and chas v'shalom el acher. The tzaddik is able to get us out of kfira, of gaiva, of ta'eva. Shemimenu arba ruchais, because the dalid is the aspect of the four ruchais, kamesh kasav koya amar Hashem me arba ruchais boy haruach, like we learned in Torah Ches. And so the tzaddik, who's the rucha, that is aver el acher, is breaking down the el acher, is the dalid, which is the bechin of the dalid ruchais, that is differentiated between el acher and Hashem echad. And this is Aleph Dar, Al Adar, right? Is to get out of the Dalid and the Reish, and that's suffix, and to go back to Hashem Echad. That's the whole inyan. I have long tires on that. I'm not going to say the whole thing now. Me'ar Baruchas, maybe tomorrow morning, Be'ezus Hashem, everybody's invited to my home, and we can talk about it then. Me'ar Baruchas Baruch, V'zel Shain Trua. And this is, if you go back to the Zohar Kodesh, it said, B'Trua the Rucha is Aver El Acher. Through Trua, the Iurucha, which is the aspect of wind and spirit, because it's the blowing of the shofar, is Avir El Acher, that destroys this aspect of idolatry. I mean, explain, because Acher is changed into Echad, and Echad is through the Dalit, and the Dalit is the Tzaddik, and Dalit is four winds, and that's the spirit. But what's this inyan of Trua? V'zel Shein Trua. Lashon, says the Rebbe, trua could mean a shofar blast, but it could also mean the pasuk Tehillim, tro'em b'shevet barzel, to shatter, to break. Kiu mishaber ruach gavaya, because the tzaddik breaks down a person's gaiva. Again, this is the hasaga of ayim ekoim kavayda. This is the aspect, as opposed to malay, which the tzaddik also is able to give. That's the aspect of shoiv, right, where the tzaddik is able to tell a person who's feeling very low, Hashem is with you. Over here, this whole column is very deep in Aye, right? And the tzaddik is destroying, and the tzaddik has these two aspects of being able to give us what we need. That on the one hand, the tzaddik is giving us the capacity to recognize that tefillah is the aspect of bias, that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is with you in every situation, and that's the tzaddik's whole thing, right? Is that he's shining from that very elevated place down into every aspect of a person's life. Hashem is with you, and you can connect to Hashem through everything. That's on the one hand, but on the other hand, the tzaddik is at the same time able to give a person the hasaga of we're not anywhere yet, and we're just very far away. And in Me'esak Shemaim, like we said in Torah Vav, even if you rise up to the heavens, still Sham'ata, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still distant. And the tzaddik is also teaching the end of that pasuk, V'atzia Sha'al. But when you sink down into hell, Hineka, but then God is with you, and both are true. Says the Heilige Rebbe Yisvav, this is the aspect of dancing and clapping. This is the heart of this lesson now. Dancing and clapping. If you remember, we had said in the very beginning that when there are dinim on Klal Yisrael, through dancing and clapping, this is going to sweeten all of the judgments. That was the headline of this teaching. And we said we're going to understand dancing more deeply. We're going to understand clapping more deeply. What do these things mean? Says the Rebbe, this aspect of dancing and clapping, they come from the spirit in the heart. That the ruach is in the heart, and that's what's causing one's hands to move and one's feet to move. And we literally see this. When a person's heart is joyous, as Hashem put it into the teva of the physiology of a person, about which, by the way, we've been learning a lot. Rebbe Nachman's very focused on the physiology. We learned about the lungs, and we learned about clapping, and we learned about breathing, and we learned about all this sighing. Right? Rebbe Nachman's whole thing is to bring it down into the guf, and to bring the guf up to the heavens, and both. That's Ratzai and Shaiv also, Shaiv and Ratzai. When a person's simcha is in their leiv, who meraket, he dances, u'maket kaf al kaf, and he claps his hands, kamuva b'tikunim, as it's brought on the Tikkun Zayar, in that same tikkun over there, chaf aleph, v'hayrucha nasha b'shis pirkin de droya b'shis pirkin de shoika. The shaykin, that there's a ruach in the lave that's nashiv b'shis pirkin de droya, that is manifest, that blows within the 6 different pirkin, the 6 prakim of the droya of the hands, of b'shis pirkin de shaykin, and of the feet. And it elevates the hands and the feet. When a person is connected to the ruach of the tzaddik, when a person has merited to nullify their aspect of gaiva, and they recognize that they're not what they thought that they were, and that the delusion of grandeur is gone, and their seichel comes back in, and then they really have more of a reason to be about gaiva, because then they actually have seichel, right? But that seichel is like the ones who know don't say, and the ones who say don't know. The ones who get to that place, adarabba, it leads to a tremendous amount of bittul, and when a person's in bittul, then their heart is an open channel. They're drawing ruach from the tzaddik, and then they can dance. Because they're not weighed down heavily by this aspect of their own nothing, and they recognize that, and there's great joy in recognizing that. The ego thinks that it's going to be terribly threatened if a person is in a state of bittul, and something terrible is going to happen. And it's exactly the opposite. The ego is literally just trying to, like with some strategy, to hold on to itself, and the minute that you let it go, it's the most glorious thing. It's the most glorious thing. And that leads to joy. So b'hai rucha, when a person is connected to the ruach of the tzaddik, nasha b'shis pirka de joy and b'shis pirka de shoik, and then they can dance. Says the Rebbe, it's an aspect of clapping and dancing. This is the aspect of the Medrash by Yaakov Avinu, when it tells us that Yaakov's lave, his heart, lifted up his feet. Says the Rebbe, what it meant? It meant that Yaakov Avinu is dancing. His heart, the simcha in his lave, activated his legs. Because of the ruach and the lave of Yaakov Avinu Bayim Harikudim came dancing. Through the tzaddik ruach, which is the aspect of the spirit, and that's nullifying the gaiva in the feet. And how do we know that there's gaiva in the feet? So the pasuk in Tehillim says very simply, Al tvi eini regel gaiva. Bring me not to feet that are arrogant. And so over here you see the problem and the solution. There's a problem because there's gaiva in the feet, and a pasuk on the other side of Tanakh, all the way in Bereshis, fixes that up by telling you, no problem, liboy nasa es raglav. Right? And to Rebbe Nachman, it's all one tapestry. The lave, which is the lave of simcha, which is a lave simcha because it's connected to ruach, and it's connected to ruach because it's plugged into the tzaddik, which means that it's a humble heart, is going to lift up the feet and is going to rectify the gaiva of al tvi regel gaiva. And that's also going to be the aspect of getting rid of the avodah zarah that we find in the feet. What shaykh is avodah zarah? Because Rebbe Nachman said that gaiva in a certain sense is idol worship, like the Rebbe told us. And how do we know that there's avodah zarah that's connected to the feet? Simple. Right? When the angels came to Avram Avinu's tent, he gave them ma'at mayim, he gave them some water, and he said, wash your feet. And Chazal say, because of the avodah salila. Says Rebbe Nachman, that's the regel gaiva. Al tvi eini regel gaiva is the avodah zarah that they were washing their feet from. How do they wash their feet? Say the tzaddikim, ma'at mayim. Ma'at. Mayim is humility, because it goes from a high place to a low place, and ma'at is just humility. That's how you wash your feet from regel gaiva. Ma'at, mayim. These two aspects. Minis batala gaiva. Ze'avad esalilim. Ukeshenes ala haraglin idea rikudim. Bechinas nasa liba es raglav. When a person's feet are elevated, nis ala haraglin al idea rikudim, through the dancing, and that's why in Breslov it's a very big deal. You know, to when you're dancing, lift your feet off the ground. To jump is a very big thing because there's tikkunim. When Breslov Hasidim dance, it isn't stam dancing, even though it's very simple because it's all very humble, and it's very, very deep. They know what they're doing because they know Torah Yud. They know a little bit about this world. They know what clapping is. They know what dancing is. We're going to see clapping in a minute. And they're lifting their feet because they recognize Liba Nasas Raglav, Al Tve'enu Regel Gaiva, Virachatz Regelechem, Ma'at Mayim. That's the dance. That's the humble dance of the Breslover Tzaddikim. When is Batal Avodah Salilim. Right, so through that, when your heart and the spirit, which is the ruach of the tzaddik in our heart, is lifting up our feet, through this all the judgments are sweetened. Because divine anger comes because of avodah zarah. So, very logically, when you remove the aspect of avodah zarah, so the charenaf is going to be removed, and we draw down kindness. And then the feet turn into, so passing in Shmuel, Ragle Chasidav, right? Where they turn into feet of chesed and not feet of din. And the feet of din is the feet of Esav, right? The aspect of Yeshli Rav, the bechina of Rav Gevura, right? As opposed to Rav Chesed, like we learned in Torah Ches, right? And that's the aspect of Esav. And those are not feet of chesed, those are feet of din. Because avodah zarah ba'olam, charen af ba'olam. How do you get avodah zarah? Gaiva. Regel gaiva. Hainu b'chinas ha-chasadim. Hainu b'chinas chazdei David ha-ne'emanim. That the chesed of David is connected to emunah. Ha-ne'emanim daika kinis batwa minas v'akfiris. That's how you get out of the avodah zarah, is through emunah. And that leads to chesed. Because avodah zarah brings gevura in the world. When you get rid of the avodah zarah, you get rid of gevura. And that's the aspect that through dancing, and I understand much more deeply what dancing is, and with what consciousness Rebbe Nachman's talking about, what kind of does not break dancing at a club. That's not going to, that's not what the Rebbe's talking about, right? The dancing of this humble kind of dance, this graceful dance, of the elevation of our feet, which is rectifying the bechina of gaiva and the delusion of grandeur and the corruption of seichel. Through this battle, habminos v'akfiras. Through this, the avodah zarah leaves, and mamela the charen af leaves. This is also the aspect of clapping. And here the Rebbe is going to do the same thing. Kehal Yedidim Ruach, we learned that through the Ruach, not only are our feet elevated, but also our hands are activated. Al Yedei HaRuach Nizgala Ha'aras Hayadayim. There's an activation, there's an illumination of the hands. Come on, Shekasa, as the pasuk says in SHIURIM, called Doidi Dofek. The voice of my beloved Dofek is knocking. Dofek Sabachinas Ruach Amuva B'Tikunim. The Tikkun Azara says, how does our pulse, which is a Dofek, how does it flow through the body? Through the Ruach and the Lev, the oxygen that causes the blood to continue to flow and to bring oxygenized blood to all the cells in the body. The Samachle, and the next pasuk says, Doidi Shalach Yadai Min Hachar. My beloved has stuck his hands out of the crack. Zebachinas Iskalas Ha'aras Yadayim. The hands are revealed. They were hidden before. They were in a dormant state. They were stuck, and now they're revealed. This is the aspect of clapping, which is Ha'aras Yadayim, Iskalas Yadayim, Va'aznis Batal Avodah Zarah. And then the Avodah Zarah that was connected to the hands that were hidden, which is a bechina of Gaiva, which is a bechina of Avodah Zarah, Hainu Kviras, is fixed. Now, how do you fix that? Chazdei David Hane'amanim, the bechina of the Raglei Chasidav, the same way that by the feet, the way that you fix the Avodah Zarah is through the aspect of to get it to Chesed, which is through Emunah. Same thing with the hands. With Zebachinas, by Yadav Emunah. His hands were faithful. Because you can have the opposite, where your hands are not faithful, and in that sense, the hands are the opposite of Emunah, which means the hands are Avodah Zarah Dika hands. If they're Avodah Zarah hands, they're Gaiva hands, and if they're Gaiva hands, they're hidden hands. So how do you reveal the hands? How do we have a Hizgalas Yadayim? Kol Doidi Doifik. It's through the Ruach, and then Doidi Shalach Yadai Min Achar. All of a sudden, the hands are revealed. Fascinatingly enough, who was it that held up Moshe Rabbeinu's hand? Right, about this pasuk of Yadai Vayadav Emunah was Aaron and Chur. Right, Doidi Shalach Yadai Min Achar. Right, that's supporting the Yadayim that are held up high. V'hi Yadav Emunah. Nimtza, says the Rebbe, Shal Yedei Tzadik, that through the Tzadik, Hainu Bechinas Ruach Shabalev, which means Anivos, that's really what it means, right? It's not like this the mystical Tzadik, like, that sounds like another religion, and Rebbe Nachman literally just clarified that on the previous page, that is absolutely not what we are talking about. This is not, like this is not that. This is, it may sound like that, right? And that's okay. Like, Kaif B'nei Adam, a monkey also looks like a human, but it's a monkey and it's not a human. It's okay if it sounds like that. It's just a distortion of this. But that doesn't either mean that we should pretend like Yiddishkeit doesn't have these concepts. It does, and Christianity is a distortion of that. That's fine. But we have to clarify the differences are very nuanced and slight, but they're very real. And the tzaddik is helping to bring us to emunah in Hashem echad, not emunah in the tzaddik. The function of the tzaddik is that the tzaddik is enabling us to see our real space, both in terms of how wonderful we are, and also in terms of how wonderful everyone else is, and therefore how simple and humble we are and should be. And this is the hasaga that every person who's getting close to the tzaddik is receiving, very hopefully. Nimtza. When we connect to the tzaddik, when we have this ruach in our heart, nizgala aras hayadayim v'araglayim. This is the revelation of our feet and the revelation of our hands, which manifest in dancing and clapping, and that can take a person out of gaiva and out of kfira. Oh my gosh, if we would implement, like, I think Rebbe Nachman is a tradition for Rebbe Nachman that a Brestover chassid should dance half an hour every day. Doesn't say what kind of techno music he should dance to. Could dance maybe to different kinds of music. Doesn't say whether it has to be on top of a vehicle or next to a vehicle. But he says half hour a day a Brestover chassid should dance. Imagine what that would do for our delusion of grandeur. If out of our busy schedule with all of that was what we're trying to fix and trying to this and fix the whole world, you stop for a second, you turn on some music and you dance a little bit. Especially with the consciousness of this, what the Yadayim are, what the Raglayim are. I'm getting out of Gaiva, I'm getting out of Avodah Zarah. And that's all the dinim in my life were only because I have this Gaiva and Avodah Zarah. And that means to say, how can I dance? My life is falling apart. And the answer is, that's why you have to dance. Because the only reason that life is falling apart is because we have dinim on ourselves. The reason we have dinim is because we feel that it's below me to dance, right? It says Adara, but the dancing is the tikkun. Right? It's not that my life is going bad so I can't dance. It's because I can't dance so my life is bad. Right? We have to dance. And this is like a counterintuitive way of thinking. Generally speaking, people are like, if there's no reason to dance, I'm not going to dance. The Rebbe says there is a reason to dance. And if you dance, you'll find there will be many, many, many more reasons to dance. Gewalt, right? You should remember this for Purim upcoming and beyond. Nimtza shalidat sadik and bechinas ruach shabalev. Nizgala aras yadayim raglayim. It's being revealed, the ha'ara of yadayim raglayim and bechinas rikudim amchas kaf v'nizbatal gaiva v'akfiras v'nisraba amuna. And all of the gaiva is going away, and the kfir is going away, and a person's seichel is out of a delusional state, and a person sees things clearly, and the whole thing's a joke, and a person recognizes how simple things are, and they take themselves less seriously, and they're very serious about taking themselves less seriously because it's very important. Right, and that's it, and then they can carry on with this clearer way of seeing themselves and the world. And then the pasuk says in Tehillim, "Ragli amda b'mishar." My feet stood up b'mishar. Your feet are aligned in a straight way. Shebechinas emuna, right, and that's the aspect of emuna. Ki aminus shebechinas natoi raglei. The opposite of emunah is expressed by David HaMelech in another pasuk, Kamaimer Asaf, where he says, "Kemat nati raglei." Right, my feet were almost pushed off the path, and the Mefarshim over there, Shenemar Sham al shehisu libel eminus kamavur. Sham, it means his feet were he was almost pushed into kfira. But when a person's feet stand b'mishar and they're not natoi, they're not going from place to place, that's moira alamuna va'aznaskaim ve'yiyad of emuna. You have the feet of emuna, ragli amda b'mishar, that's vayihi ragla of emuna, and then you have vayihi yad of emuna. When you have these two things, they're cleansed from the klipa of arrogance. Everything is opened up. It's an open channel. We become much more simple. We become much more directly, intimately connected. And that's the ultimate goal of Iskarvus to Tzadikim. Now Rebbe Nachman says in Torah Yud, Ois Zayin, that the Torah itself has the aspects of hands and feet. Because the Torah has the aspect of nigla and nister, and this is very important. Niglahu b'chinas yadayim. This aspect of the nigla of Torah is the yadayim of Torah. The pasuk that we use to demonstrate hiskalas hayadayim referred to hands that are revealed. That they were concealed, but then they became revealed. And that's the nigla of Torah. It's the revealed aspect of Torah. Minachar, hainu charus ala luchais. Minachar, that's an aspect of the Ten Commandments that are niglas haTorah, that are etched into the luchais. Shu b'nigla, that you can see it, they're there. So that's daidi shalach yadai minachar, right? The yadayim of Torah are a manifestation of that which is etched, charus, onto the luchais. The nister bechinas raglin, but the bechin of nister is the aspect of the feet. Right, this sweetness of the feet. Ma yerech b'seiser, the Gemara says in Sukkah, just like a yerech is in seiser, right? That a person's legs are hidden. Even culturally, generally speaking, we don't walk around with gloves all day, right? Although there's still some people from COVID who are walking around with all kinds of body coverings. I don't know why, but someone should inform them that it's over. But there are some people still wearing gloves, but generally speaking, we don't wear gloves, but we do wear trousers, right? Like they call them here for the Americans that are rolling their eyes, pants, right? we still wear, and we hear pants, hopefully, and trousers, and we wear both. But a person covers up the lower part of their body. That's a bechina of nister. Legs are nister. Yadayim are nigla, and that's true. I'm saying, look at us, right? This is it. Our hands are nigla, and the feet are nister. Mayerech is beseiser. Uklalias haTorah nikra leiv, and the whole collectivity of the Torah is called a heart. Shemascheles bebeis umesayemes balamid, because it begins with the letter beis and it ends with the letter lamid, and that's of course leiv. Shesham mishkan ruach. What's there? What is in the leiv? We said is the ruach. The nasha b'shis pirkin, the joy b'shis pirkin, the raglin. Hainabed nigla v'nister. And so the whole Torah is this tikkun. The Torah in and of itself has a nigla nister that are activated through the beis and the lamed. And that's the aspect of the tzaddik whose ruach enables us to activate our yadayim v'raglayim. And that correlates to Torah Ches, where we learned that where does the tzaddik get the ruach from? From the Torah. Because ruach alikim rachefes apanei hamayim ein mayim ela Torah. I'm going to say very, very briefly, because this would require me to go into tremendous iyun, and we don't have time because I really want to get to Ches is Zebuchinas Mordechai Esther, which is literally Tanis Esther. We're going to get to it in a minute. But very, 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 very briefly, we mentioned in the beginning of the Torah that what unlocks this whole lesson is the idea that which is higher is able to reach the lower place. That which is higher is able to reach lower. That which is lower is able to reach higher. That means that which physically in this realm seems to be higher up is actually mushrush in a lower place because the line is shorter. Right? If it's rooted in a higher place, it's able to reach lower down. Higher place, lower down. It's like volume, just like it grows and it shrinks, right? And that's true both up and down in terms of sound waves, right? And it grows and grows and grows and it goes like this, right? And we learned that because of Har Sadabayis, the Rebbe said that you elevate prayer from the mountain to the field to the house, which is the greatest Yerida of prayer, because the mountain is higher and the field is lower and the house is the lowest. And over here you see the same element where we've been learning about, on the first daf, about the tzaddik's bechina of ratzai and the bechina of shayv, where the tzaddik is giving those people who are low down this aspect of shayv that they should know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mamash with them. And on the other hand, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving to the others the aspect of ratzai, those who are high up. He's giving them this hasaga. You don't know anything yet, right? And that's what we learned in the dynamics of those two things. Now over here in Oizvav, it looks not connected, but what I'm trying to give over is the Mahalach and Likutei Moharan, where every single part of the Torah is literally tied into. You just have to find the theme, right? That's underlined. There's an or, there's a Geulah that sits at the core of the whole entire teaching. Over here we learn about feet and hands. Feet and hands is also up and down. And in Isaiah, we're learning that the Yadayim and the Raglayim are connected to Nigla and Nister. Now we know that Nister is higher than Nigla. Nister is higher, right? Nister is more interior. Nister is a greater light. But over here, the way that it shows up is that the Nister is below and the Nigla is above, right? And it's the same kind of concept, right? Where that which is higher is lower and that which is lower is higher. And more than that, that the Torah in its collectivity is a lave is spelled completely backwards. The base comes first and the lamed comes next. Like the whole thing is upside down. Binah, right? The whole energy is flipped. And the Geulah is, again, just briefly, is that even though the Bechina, the Hasaga of Aye is higher up, that's because it manifests higher up because it's rooted lower down. That's not the greatest Geulah, right? That's a Geulah of Din. That's a Geulah of Hester. That's not a Geulah of his Galus. That's a Geulah of, God, you're not there yet and you got to keep on going. But the Bechina of the Raglayim, which is Nister, means that it's rooted in the highest place. And that asaga is able to come all the way down to the Raglayim. That's where it's manifest because it's rooted in its source in a higher place, and that's the bechina of elevating. I thought that was an elephant. Elevating the tefillah from a mountain to a field to the house, which even though it's a physical descent, just like the Raglayim, but it's actually drawing on a much higher light, just like Nister, which manifests in the feet. Right? It manifests. Not where things are, it's where things manifest. And so the lamed and the beis spell lave, right? But this R that's manifest in the lamed is actually secondary. It's lower down because it appears here to be first, right? In that place, really, what's first? The beis is first. Memela, the Torah, that's a reflection of the way that things are up there in the source and not the way that things manifest is going to be flipped around. I don't usually go into Ian like that, but I just felt that was a sweet Nekuda to point out. But the last couple of minutes left, let's move into Eisches. V'zebechinas Mordechai ve'Esther. How wild is this? Like, what kind of hashgacha has us, without any calculation, sitting on Tanis Esther morning, learning Rebbe Nachman's Purim lesson, V'zebechinas Mordechai ve'Esther. It is shocking and it's so beautiful. And I'm so grateful for it. Zebechinas Mordechai ve'Esther. This is the aspect of Mordechai ve'Esther ve'Haman bechinas Purim, bechinas Geulah shehipel pur, bechinas Omer sa'orim. Right, which Mordechai was learning with the Talmidim. This is the whole Purim. This is the core, literally the core of Purim. Let's do this quickly. Ki Haman bechinas avodas halilim. Haman is the aspect of avodah zara. K'may mechachamein and zuchan devracha, because as Chazal tell us, sha'asa atzma avodas halilim. He turned himself into avodah zara. How did he turn himself into avodah zara? Because Haman is the pinnacle of gaiva. Haman is mamash Amalek. The whole thing of Amalek is kfir. The whole thing of Amalek is to get a person out of belief in Hashem and into belief in themselves. And Haman mamish turns himself into an avodah zara. Everybody's bowing down to him. Mordechai is the one person in the whole world who's not bowing down to him. He's a nut job, right? He's in a delusion. He's mamish living a life in a dimyon. This is why he tries and he's so happy when the girl falls out on the month that Moshe Rabbeinu died, on the day that Moshe Rabbeinu died. Ki Moshe mevatel avodah zara, because Moshe Rabbeinu's whole thing, which is the tzaddik, is to counteract the avodah zara. Ubeshvil ze nikbar mul beis pa'ar. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu was buried next to beis pa'ar, because Chazal tell us beis pa'ar is the biggest avodah zara, the most disgusting avodah zara. He was buried mul beis pa'ar because he's going to counteract beis pa'ar, which is yet another support for this, that the tzaddik is the way to get out of avodah zara. Avodah zara, gaiva, tzaddik. It's a chazal. Ki Moshe gematria charein af, and we know that avodah zara brings charein af in the world, and Moshe Rabbeinu that's buried next to beis pa'ar in order to be mevatel avodah zara pa'ar. Then avodah zara is the aspect of gaiva. Good morning, and therefore this is going to counteract the charein af of the gaiva that's caused. So Moshe Rabbeinu, as Moshe is going to be gematria charein af, ki mevatel charein af shel avodah zara, because Moshe Rabbeinu that's the mevatel the avodah zara, which is gaiva, is mevatel the charein af, because all the while that there's avodah zara in the world, there's charein af in the world. Ki kibel Torah, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is deeply connected to the Torah. We call it Torah's Moshe, Shu B'chinas Yadayim V'Raglayim, because Moshe Rabbeinu is the collectivity of the Torah that has Nikla and Nister, has Yadayim, and the Raglayim is Beis, Lamed, Beis, the Lave, Shal Yadayim Nizbat Avodah Salilim. Through that, the Avodah Salilim is going to be removed. So that's why it was Adar, because Adar is the month that Moshe Rabbeinu dies. Ki Chashav Ki Kfar Meis Moshe. He thought Moshe is dead, and the whole tikkun of Moshe Rabbeinu and Torah's Moshe, which is the aspect of the Nigla and the Nister, is gone. It's gone. The Ein Oid Mi Sheyuchal Avato Koyach Avodah Salilim, and there's nobody who's going to be able to rectify that. But he made a tremendous mistake, because Moshe Rabbeinu did a job that was really fit for two people, and this goes back to Torah Vav, which is the realization that the Nekuda Liyaina and the Nekuda Tachtaina, that are themselves Ratzei and Shoiv, that are themselves Ayin and Malai, is really one Nekuda, and it's all wrapped up into Moshe Rabbeinu. And even though there's Yeshua, but he's just reflecting the light of Moshe, and they're absolutely one. So in the light of Purim, Kimu Masha Kiblu Kfar, which we're going to learn about probably not today because we only have 2 minutes left, and I already realized I miscalculated. I went overtime. I didn't realize we can go literally until shacharis, but that's also okay because there's a lot to learn. And we're going to discuss in a minute whether we're going to meet tomorrow. 1 second. That fragments into two. The tikkun that was accomplished to counteract Amalek in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, that was just Moshe Rabbeinu, now becomes Aval Mordechai ve'Esther. It becomes Mordechai and Esther. They had the capacity to be Mevatel Haman, because in their dar they were Moshe. They together were Moshe. And that's of course why there's a reconnection to the Torah, anew, in their generation. And how is that expressed? Because the pasuk says, Kimu v'kiblu. Kimu mashe kiblu kvar. Says the Rebbe, simple. Kimu v'kiblu. Kimu is a b'chinas raglin. A person stands on their feet. Kimu is feet. Kiblu is hands, because a person accepts something with their hands. Kimu v'kiblu. Nikle and Nister, they accepted the Torah mechadash. Kimu mashe kiblu kvar, and that's also very deep. Mashe kiblu, so they already had the Yadayim. Now they needed the Raglayim, meaning the whole inyan of Purim is the bechina of Shoiv, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what. That's the whole Gilui of Purim. So they already had the hasaga of Gevura, of Har Sinai, of the Haris held over their head, and tekavos of her mutvim lav shamtek v'raschem. They already had that bechina of the Yadayim. Now they need the bechina of the Raglayim. Now they need that higher element of Nister that's able to shine down and activate their Nister. That's the whole thing of Purim. Bechinas, right? Bechinas Yadayim, bechinas haTorah ba'atzma kimu v'kiblu, bechinas Mordechai v'Esther. And this is the aspect of Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai is the Yadayim, and Esther is the feet. How do we know? Because Mordechai is Mardrar. Mardrar. Right? That's where he's rooted. And the Gemara in Chulin tells us, Mordechai min haTorah minai mar drar. Drar means cheres. Drar is freedom. Sevachinas yadayim. Kamesh kasav daidi shalach yadai min hachar. Right? Char is cheres. Char is salaluchas. Chazal say al tikr char is salacheres. Right? So Moshe Rabbeinu is mar drar. Drar is cheres. Right? So that's the aspect of that which is etched onto the luchas, which is the niglas haTorah. The Esther bechinas shekayin is the feet. Ma yerech beseser. That's Esther. Right? So Esther is the feet. Rebbe Nachman's decoding the whole Torah. You see, we knew many of these Mamar Chazal. The Rebbe was just decoding the whole thing. He's like, yeah, Kimu v'kiblu, Esther, Mordechai, Mardrar, V'zeloshin Purim, This is what Purim is all about. Hainu bittul avodas halilim, the bittul, the nullification of the avodah zarah, kama shekasav, pura darachti levadi. The Gemara, the pasuk says in Yeshayahu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to the end of days, pura darachti levadi, I trampled on a vineyard, a wine press alone. Ome'amim ein ish iti. Now the Christians forgot this pasuk apparently. Ome'amim, because that's what it literally says. Ome'amim ein ish iti. I don't have any. There's no person there's no man with me. It's just me. And this is what the tzaddik counterintuitively. The tzaddik's whole thing is that he's coming to be mevatel avodah zarah. The tzaddik is not chas v'shalom taking the place of Hashem. That's just replacing one idolatry with another idolatry. The tzaddik is bringing us straight to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ome'amim ein ish iti. And that's the aspect of pura darachti levadi, and that's Purim is pura. Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I trampled on avodah zarah, because Purim gives you the ability to dance and clap. Purim is mishnichnas adar marba mesimcha, filling your heart with the joy of the ruach of anivos, of the tzaddik, of the skalas, the adayim and the raglayim, the nigla and the nista, the realization that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us in the ups and the downs. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us from the standpoint of getting out of gaiva, im esak shamayim sham ata, the bechina of nigla, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me in the bechina of nister, which is vansia sha'al hinaka. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should grant us the ability on Purim to connect deeply to the ruach of the tzaddik, to the ruach of anivas, to the ruach of simplicity, to the ruach of the joy of being plugged into the depth of the depth of the depth of the Torah. Hashem should bless us. We have to quickly run. We're late already for shacharis.